Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar briefing to update you all on the guidance we're developing for the responsible sourcing of solar panels. I'm EJ Allen. I'm a consultant at Action Sustainability. I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a moment, and I'm project manager for this project. I'm running this webinar along with my colleague Anna, who you'll meet very shortly.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm a consultant also working on this project with EJ and Helen. So yeah, I'll get into a bit of the details in a little bit.
So today is really about updating you on our work, giving you more of an insight into what you can expect and by when, rather than to start sharing all the key findings and getting into the nitty-gritty into the content of the guidance. So today is more of an update of this is what we're working on, and this is what you can expect. So the agenda for this session, it's just welcome and intros, which we're doing now. We'll then look at who the funding partners are. We'll start to have a look at what is the issue, why are we here, why industry needs to respond. We'll look at what the challenge is, and then we'll look at what are the specific aims and objectives of the guidance. We'll touch on progress to date and timelines, and then we'll also kind of flag some opportunities for you to get involved. And now I've got a dog whining next to me, which never happens, but it's suddenly just started. So if I have to throw him out in a second, forgive me. And then we'll finish with some Q&A. I'm going to get rid of the dog. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, so while EJ does that, we'll finish with some Q&A as well. But if you have any questions throughout, the Q&A function is open. So yeah, feel free to pop those questions in the Q&A chat or use the chat as well if you have any links that you want to share with us, or any comments that you want to put in the chat. So yes, please use the question and answer function and the chat function. And you're back. I'll hand back over to you.
Nothing like real challenges. That hasn't happened in months. Sorry about that. So yes, Anna may have just said that we're going to be recording this as well, so you can share it with any colleagues or other stakeholders you may want to speak to or to know about the project. Okay, so we've already done introductions. So that's myself and Anna. So the project itself. So Action Sustainability is leading the project. We're globally recognised leaders in sustainable procurement and supply chain management, and we've been specialists in this area since we set up back in 2005, I think it was. We've led the UK and the Australian delegations in developing the ISO standard, ISO 2400, the international standard for sustainable procurement. And my colleague Helen Carter was also on the drafting panel for BS 25700, which launched last year, that looked at organisational responses to modern slavery guidance. So both those ISOs are freely available, they're guidance standards, so do have a look at those. So from a modern slavery perspective, I suppose, we've worked with a range of clients in the built environment to help them combat modern slavery and labour exploitation through all elements of procurement and supply chain. So some of our clients are Ministry of Justice, some of the local authorities, Morgan Sindall, South Western Rail, Greater London Authority, Local Government Association, and I think Gas Networks Ireland as well. So those are specific modern slavery projects. Action Sustainability is also the delivery partner for the multi-award winning Supply Chain Sustainability School. I know many of you on the call will be familiar with that, so bear with me if that's you. But for those of you who are new to that, it's a collaboration of 200 clients, contractors, FM service providers, house builders, infrastructure companies, utilities companies, suppliers and subcontractors. And it's a free virtual learning platform with more than 60,000 members who use the school to upskill their organisations and value chain on all things sustainability, and that's a free resource. So we'll be disseminating the guidance through the school as and when it's published. So funding partners are the organisations that you can see here in front of you. There are some more that we're not yet able to share their names, but these are some of the organisations who are all contributing to the funding of the project, and they're actively involved in the project steering group meeting. The project is also supported by the Supply Chain Sustainability School I mentioned a moment ago, Solar Energy UK, and also the Indirect Spend Alliance, who will all be helping to disseminate the final guidance to their networks. Okay, so let's move on. So what's the issue? We're not going to go into detail at this stage. So I suppose a high level to get us thinking about this. I'm guessing most of you are already aware of the issue, which is why you're here. We hear about net zero every day. Climate change, it's an urgent environmental issue, a huge understatement. And last year, in a somewhat historic move, the UN declared healthy environment a human right. But what is often forgotten or maybe ignored in some cases is that it's not only an urgent environmental issue, but also a human rights issue. So this is where the phrase just transition comes in. Many of you are probably already familiar with this, but if not, yes, there are different definitions out there. But when we talk about it, we're thinking about it as the idea of transitioning to net zero, but leaving no one behind. So it's quite a simple definition, but it's about considering the impact of the transition to net zero on people. So thinking about human rights impacts, okay? So with that in mind, we've got more and more countries and organisations committing to net zero, and we've got a huge growing demand for renewable energy. Solar, quite rightly, is seen as one of the key solutions to mitigating climate change. Yet one of the challenges here is that the supply chains of some renewable energy systems have been associated with negative human rights impacts for workers and communities. I think it's fair to say that the first time most of us became aware of this was when In Broad Daylight was published back in May 2021 by Sheffield Hallam University. And the report exposed how the solar industry itself is particularly vulnerable to forced labour, a form of modern slavery. The key finding of the report is it reveals how forced labour in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China, which provides 45% of the world's solar grade polysilicon, which is used in solar panels, how forced labour is ingrained in the entire solar supply chain and is deep rooted into international markets in general. Following on from the publication of that report in September 2022, I think it was, the UN issued a report into the allegations of abuse in the Xinjiang province region, declaring the situation as amounting to crimes against humanity. Other reports that you may have seen that look at this particular challenge, there's some here. So there's Clean Dirty Energy, which is predominantly aimed at councils, UK councils, local authorities, and it provides some high-level guidance and signposting to tools that are out there. Specifically for procurement. And then there's also one here called Eradicating Forced Labour from Solar Supply Chains, which was written by US investor called Eventide, which looks at the scale of the challenge and again, a kind of high level proposed solution. Anna's going to talk in more detail about the challenge, but it's not just about the challenge around the Xinjiang region of China. It's also thinking about the wider supply chain and value chain. Many panels are now manufactured in places like Vietnam, Malaysia. I think we all know that there are issues regarding labour exploitation and modern slavery there as well. It's prevalent all over the world. Okay, so I think at that point, I'm going to hand over to Anna. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you. So yeah, touching a bit more on why does industry need to respond? So like EJ said, obviously there's a huge focus at the moment on that response to net zero, and solar technology is a huge part of that response. So coupled with sort of the increase in that demand for solar, there's now increased intelligence in the solar industry, and it's revealing potential human rights issues in its supply chain, which means there's growing pressure on organisations to achieve supply chain transparency and demonstrate modern slavery due diligence in their international solar panel supply chains, or as a minimum, demonstrate that the production or manufacturing of the panels has no links to certain regions, like EJ said. But as we're saying, like, the response for this is just broader than just looking at a certain region. If there's a process in place, it should cover the full spectrum of issues within it, concerning forced labour, and not just focusing on one area. Having said that, these requirements that are being pushed by the demand for solar, that new intelligence that's in place, is also supported by fast and evolving legislative landscapes. So we've got a few examples of this on here. We've obviously got the UK Modern Slavery Act, which I presume a lot of you are very aware of. And we've got the latest PPNO2 guidelines for public procurement, which has modern slavery government supply chain guidance in there. And we've got the new EU due diligence coming in place. And you've also got the United States Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act as well, which is really seeing a clampdown put on those imported goods which are coming from the region in China. So we're seeing these legislative landscapes forcing industry to look a little bit more deeper at this. And there's also new legislations that are coming as well. So we've got some coming in loads of more countries, and we've also got some in Norway and Germany and Australia at the moment as well. So this is a growing space. There's going to be more and more demand for businesses to respond and provide some evidence that something is being done to investigate the transparency and the human rights issues associated with these supply chains. But looking at industry, there's a few things out there that's going on in terms of responding to this. But at the moment, it's a bit of a fragmented response to addressing these challenges. So some of these initiatives that we've looked into and we're aware of is the Solar Energy Industry Association Transparency Traceability Protocol. So this is the US solar industry body who've developed a protocol for traceability. This traceability protocol includes examples of controls to enable compliance and confidence in supply claims that they're making. It maps out what buyers' roles are. It puts some key questions to ask suppliers. It also provides the summary of drivers for solar traceability. It also gives the guidance for organisations to consider their own procurement process, so that process to the ability to cause and contribute, so not just responding to that, but what those processes are and how they're enabling some of those issues within the supply chain. It also gives examples of solar supply chain maps. So it's a really, really good document, and it's there within the US. This is one industry body that's developed a traceability protocol. So if you want to have a look, take a look at that. And then we've got some other ones that are going on within the UK and Europe. So Solar Energy UK have formed a responsible sourcing task group, and they've developed high-level guidance for Solar Energy UK members to follow in their procurement process. So that's something that's happening in the UK. And with Solar Power Europe as well, they've conducted a benchmarking exercise which has some ESG best practices. So that's a good guidance document which has some examples of best practice within ESG responses in solar panel supply chains as well. So there's a few examples there, and we've also got the Solar Stewardship Initiative, so SSI. So that was another thing that's developed by Solar Power UK, Solar Energy UK and Solar Power Europe, and that was done in March 2021, and that's to promote responsible production in the solar value chain. So what's quite interesting about that SSI initiative is that there's a few missions that they have in there. The number one mission in there is to ensure that the energy transition is just, inclusive and respect human rights. Another mission that they have is to prepare the solar community for relevant upcoming laws and regulations on responsible supply chains. So, you know, like we mentioned earlier, the EU due diligence and a ban on forced labour products. So what they're doing is they've built a roadmap and a code, an assurance system, which puts into practice a shared commitment of over 50 companies to ensure that the integrity of their supply chains and improve ESG performance. So right now, those codes and assurance systems are currently in the pilot stage, which is due to be concluded at the end of this quarter. So that's an industry response that we'll be very much keeping abreast of and following up on how that went and what's happening next. So there's, like I say, there's currently a few things going on in industry. It's a little bit disjointed, but there's a few things going on. There's a lot of legislation that's forcing businesses to do something here. So there's plenty of drivers, which is getting us, which is one of the reasons why we've started looking at this and why we've got partners interested in this. So there's a huge appetite for this at the moment. And then we'll maybe go on to some of the challenges now as well. So another reason, obviously, that this has been triggered is that there's a challenge. So it's not a simple supply chain to look at. It's not a simple procurement process. There's no quick solution, and there's a lot of challenges around this space. So one of those challenges is the lack of knowledge around the fragmented global markets of those key components and the complex route to the supply for solar for clients, installers, manufacturers. So we're especially seeing this during the interviews that we've kickstarted of buyers of solar. So that lack of knowledge is a big roadblock and a challenge. It's not available quite easily. The suppliers are maybe not as transparent as they should be. So that lack of knowledge is a key part there. Another challenge is the environmental human rights issues associated with alternatives to solar and the lack of transparency on those initiatives. So like EJ mentioned earlier, there's many issues associated with renewables, and there's not an awful lot of information out there to help provide those educated and balanced decisions on what is the most sustainable option and route to go down. So considering both social and environmental issues is a key part, and that lack of transparency is an issue in helping being able to make those decisions within the procurement process. So which leads on quite nicely to the next challenge, which is that traditional procurement and compliance driven methods are just not really sufficient with this. Collaboration and a strategic approach is going to be required to actually address the issues that we've got here, purely because of the complexity of the typical tender questions that you would ask, questionnaires, contractual clauses, which are obviously better than doing nothing. These typical procurement responses are not going to be enough to create change in this space. So where we're looking to is collaboration, where we can influence and action by both business, government and industry, which is going to be required to make change in this space. And then, as explained on the last slide, there are very few initiatives underway which are really clear, providing clear step-by-step guidance on how to address the issue. And those initiatives that are in place are not actually widely known or understood throughout the industry. So again, through the interviews, we're finding not many people are aware of some of those initiatives we mentioned on the last slide. So, creating awareness is really important in this space. Thank you. Pass it on.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, so what's the guidance going to be other than just responsible sourcing guidance? So let's have a look at the details. So I suppose taking a step back, it's going to be, the ultimate guide's going to be co-branded, it's going to be free, it's going to be publicly available guidance document for predominantly aimed at the built environment, which will provide best practice procurement and supply chain advice to help tackle due diligence in the responsible sourcing of solar panels. So the main focus will be looking at forced labour and labour exploitation, but it will reference other sustainability considerations as well. So the guidance itself clearly focusing in on solar panels. However, the content and advice provided, it will be transferable and could be used to support responsible sourcing strategies for other categories of spend. Who it's for, it's targeted at all those who are involved in, or I suppose who influence any stage of the procurement cycle. So that could be end users, clients, contractors, could be home builders, manufacturers, installers, across the value chain there. So the guidance itself is going to give summary of the challenge, why industry needs to respond. We're going to do a high level overview of the renewable energy and solar markets, but high level as opposed to, in depth. We'll be giving an insight into environmental and human rights considerations and issues associated with solar and solar alternatives, including things like end-of-life impacts, circular economy and so on. The legislative landscape bit is going to be in there as well from a driver's perspective, so looking at an overview of what that looks like and potential future impacts. We'll introduce and explain those collaborative initiatives that are underway to address the issue, including the ones that Anna's just talked about there, including looking at alternatives to polysilicon as well. But then where it gets into the, I suppose, the more exciting bit is around, it's the top tips, practical, strategic how-to guidance on developing and implementing procurement strategies. So, if you think about procurement, it's everything from engaging with the solar panel supply chain, mapping supply chains, balanced approach to considering market alternatives, that piece around risk management, managing the risk internally and externally, the role of collaboration, which is critical here, collaboration with peers and industry stakeholders and the supply chain. Examples of tools, techniques, templates, technology platforms that can be used to support the procurement of solar panels through procurement cycle, and also advice on how to procure consultants or auditors as well, who you may use to do your due diligence, which is a really interesting one as well. What it won't be doing then, so you've heard what it will be doing. What it won't be doing is, it's not about embargoes on certain countries or supply chains. It's not a political document. It's not, here's a list of clean suppliers, and here's a list of ones that you're not to use. It's guidance, it's due diligence guidance. It's about forced labour and labour exploitation due diligence. It's a process to identify and mitigate. And the idea is it can be used. What it won't do is provide assurance just because you use it that no forced labour or modern slavery is in your supply chains. And again, I'm sure many of you will understand that situation anyway, but it's surprising the amount of times people, will make that request. And we just want something that makes it so that there's no forced labour in our supply chains. So it's not going to provide all the answers because it's guidance, but it's best practice procurement guidance, but with practical tips and tools as well as we go through. Okay, so that's the aims and objectives of the guidance. So I think now what we'll go through is just let you all know, I suppose, where we're up to. So we're hoping to have the content written, the guidance written by summer. And we're going to be running some workshops to test it out with different audiences. And then we're hoping to publish it after summer. So probably September, October time is when we're hoping to publish the guidance. Where we're at now, we are currently, we've done steps 1, 2, and 3 of kickoff meetings, stakeholder identification, developing interview question set. And now myself and the team are kind of very deep into the research stage where we're conducting interviews on most days with various different stakeholders or representatives from across the value chain. In parallel to that, we're conducting desktop research, and typically, the more you dig, the more you find. The more interviews we run, the more publications we find and case studies. So, and we'll look at the detail of that in a moment. So once the interviews are all complete, as I said, we're going to be running some workshops for stakeholders to get their feel for actually what we've written so far. How does it sit? What are we missing? That practical insight, really, almost peer review. So interviews, where are we at? Although the numbers have probably gone up today, but we've got 38 interviews confirmed to date. The organisations that we've got interviews confirmed with are on the right-hand side there. So there's a broad mix there. We've got some of the associations on there, like ultra low carbon solar in the US. We've got some manufacturers, we've got certification standards organisations, lots of insights from government, including insights from Australia as well, research institutions, trade bodies, clients, end users. The area that we've got circled in red, as I'm sure you can guess, that's where we're looking for more contacts to interview. We have got Solar Energy UK and Ultra Low Carbon Solar who are reaching out to their manufacturers, supplier members to engage in interviews. But I suppose a first call to action to any of you, if any of you on the call today know of other stakeholders who you think it would be good for us to speak to, please do contact myself or Anna and put us in touch, and we can follow up on that. So we're kind of, I'd say, halfway through the interview stages, but we're still looking for lots more people and organisations to get their perspectives from. I think that's where we're at from the interview side of things. So I think, Anna, it's over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so like Age just mentioned, there's a few areas that where we're lacking with stakeholders. So if you have anyone that you think would be of interest to us, send over the contact details or make the introductions, and we would be really grateful for that. Any documents, any research, any articles, any information that you might have that you think will be useful for this will be really, really valuable as well. And finally, once it's published, obviously we'll share it with you all. It will be published on our website, it'll be published on socials, but help by spreading the news, because the word about this, because a key part of the issue is that awareness piece. So raising it is a good start in tackling the problem. So yeah, we've got our contact details on there. Feel free to send anything or put it in the chat right now. And yeah, we'll get back in touch with you. It will be really helpful.
Thanks, Anna. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just kind of, it doesn't look as though any questions have come in, or am I missing them? No questions.
No,
Does anyone, I suppose, no opportunity. You can either use the chat or the Q&A function. You find it, if you hover at the bottom of the screen, a kind of panel should pop up and you can click on the bit that says chat or Q&A. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we've had Paul asking, are there any plans for generating an index for scoring different aspects of modern slavery and similar issues such as employee rights, health and safety, responsibility, local environment? Otherwise, each time anyone carries out due diligence, they will have to go through the same search. Anna, do you want to have a go at responding to that?
Creating an index for scoring different aspects of modern slavery. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know if you can clarify that a little bit. In terms of index, there is the Global Slavery Index, which is a good start to know in terms of country. And then there's obviously different findings and studies where you can dig a little deeper in terms of ranking and rating risk when you go through that due diligence process. I don't think we have a plan to create an index for scoring different aspects of modern slavery. At the moment, you know, when it comes to that, what we tend to recommend clients to do is look at publicly available information and engage key stakeholders who have more information and are able to refine that to help go through that risk scoring process. I think that's the question that you're asking there. I don't know if I've got that wrong, please drop a comment and let us know. EJ, do you have anything more to add on that one?
No, other than to, yeah, Paul, if you want to, yeah, as Anna said, if you want to get in touch, maybe there's, I'm not sure which organisation you're from, but, you know, maybe there's an interview there we can have. Okay, Paul said you've answered. Thanks, Anna. Okay, anything else from anyone? Otherwise, you'll all get 15 minutes back of your time. No, okay. I was expecting lots of questions. Hopefully we've stunned you all into silence. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We'll make sure we send out a copy of the slides and the recording if you like it. So you'll have our contact details in there. But yeah, looking forward to hearing from you and do get in touch. So thanks, everyone, for your time.